Having worked with maps in an attempt to reconfigure their forms and meaning for most of his life, Gerhard Marx, these geographical drawings sparked a rich narrative that set the scene for Ecstatic Archive, his current solo exhibition that opened yesterday at the Goodman Gallery and will be on display until the 9th of March. Well, Gerhard joins us now in studio to tell us more about his work. Gerhard, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
I want to take you back to one of your earlier projects that you did that obviously led up to this solo exhibition taking place.
Yes.
Your reflections just on your prior work.
I started working with maps in just after '94. There was a moment where we were doing a sort of a road trip, and it was during the time that town names and so forth, place names, were being renamed all across the country. And there was this beautiful moment where the map and the names on the map no longer correlated to, so basically the map that I grew up with, the road map that we used to travel with, suddenly no longer correlated to the names in the landscape physically out there. So there was this correlation between the real world and the mapped world. And somehow in that moment, for me, the map lost its authority. There was a sense that I could change the map. And I suppose the sense that it was happening all across the country meant that somehow I could affect these maps, I could work with these maps, I could change them. I didn't need to simply accept what they were giving me.
Indeed, and you know, I almost wonder the dynamic or the element that technology has brought in to how we view maps and how we follow maps.
Yes.
I think now we don't even have to remember street names because
Yes.
we follow a gadget that tells us where to go. Has that affected just your outlook and your work in terms of what you've done?
It's affected certainly on a practical level because maps are becoming redundant. So to a large extent, I'm able to get maps because archives are getting rid of them as they get digitalized.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is on some levels it changes, and on other levels, I mean, of course, paper is becoming less and less involved. But I think as it becomes less used, it also becomes more precious, and one starts to see it for what it is, and for the beautiful objects also that they are. But certainly on other levels, some things stay the same. A map functions primarily on an aerial point of view, and in the same way a Google map or a satellite view it still functions on an aerial view, which is one of the central things that I sort of address in the project.
Now, your current work, I mean, a large part of it has been inspired by the words of writer Alexander Dodd, where he says, the formal and fictive possibilities of perspective.
Yes.
How do you then marry that with what you do?
So that thought comes from the idea of an aerial view, which is basically traditionally a map works on an eye that looks down. It's kind of the God's eye view. Bird's eye view. It's a sort of disembodied, objectified viewpoint, and that is a viewpoint that basically speaks of a position of power over landscape. So it's that viewpoint that allows a position of power to turn landscape into territory, really. So what I did initially is I started saying to myself, how could I bring that viewpoint down to earth so that it becomes a subjective map, a map made by an individual, not from a point of power, but from an individual sort of sense of inquiry.
And it just brings us closer because
Yes.
we navigate on the ground.
Yes,
So
yes.
it just makes more sense.
So basically, if you bring that viewpoint down, if you imagine the rectangular shape of a map and you bring it down, you start seeing it in perspective.
All right, speak to us, sorry Gerhard, about the material elements that you use to put together your artwork.
So it's literally maps that are cut up into pieces. So I kind of destroy them in the process of remaking them. I cut them into pieces and then reassemble them, literally sort of in the simplest manner. They sort of stuck together with glue like a collage. But by building up layers upon layers, I can reconstruct their sort of logic by physically cutting them up and reassembling them.
And just the messaging or the themes that you explore in your work, what is it that you hope that people who consume your kind of art and specifically this project will walk away with? Any lessons that you hope or messages that you hope people will take away from what you're trying to explore?
I try to steer clear of sort of messages, but what I like to do is to open a body of work as a sort of way of inquiring into something, so sort of negotiating something. But I think by mushing these sort of different geographies, different time periods, different landscapes, it's built out of an archive of maps that were decommissioned by a library. And it comprises maps from the last 200 years, from Europe, Japan, Russia, South Africa, all over the world, basically. And I think what it is about trying to imagine new sort of spatial imaginaries or spatial constructions in which one can sort of view a far more complicated, hybrid, meshed together kind of migrant world, a world of more complexity than maybe the maps depicted in its original state.
Well, this certainly shows me how much the world has changed, Gerhard. Thank you so much for your great work, and thank you so much for your time this morning. That was artist Gerhard Marx, and he was speaking to us about his current body of work called Ecstatic Archive that he's currently showcasing at the Goodman Gallery and will be on display until the 9th of March.